My in-laws believed the Alps was a lavish ski resort I purchased with my late husband's life insurance. They arrived with a moving truck and sheer arrogance, expecting to rule my new home. But when the heavy oak doors swung open, my mother-in-law dropped her designer bag on the cold concrete. She did not see a holiday villa. She saw a fortress of high-tech secrets, and she realized too late that I am the queen of this empire. My name is Summer Lamberton. I am 38 years old, and for the last 3 years, I have been a widow. But before I was a widow, and long before I became the woman standing barefoot on heated concrete floors in the middle of the Colorado wilderness, I was a ghost in my own life. I was a quiet wife. I was a patient daughter-in-law. I was a shadow that moved silently through rooms that did not belong to me. Now, I exist in high definition. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of my living quarters, watching the sun crest over the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains. The light here was different than anywhere else. It was sharp, unforgiving, and incredibly pure. It hit the gray, exposed concrete walls of my home and softened them, turning the brutalist architecture into something that felt less like a bunker and more like a temple. I called this place the Alps. It was a private joke, a little nod to the absurdity of my own existence. When people heard the name, they imagined Swiss chalets, wooden beams, fondue by a roaring fire, and snow-capped European peaks. They imagined a vacation home. They were wrong. My Alps was a fortress of raw concrete and steel, nestled deep within a private acreage in Colorado. Miles away from the nearest paved public road, it was a structure designed not to blend in with nature, but to stand stoic against it. It was unyielding. It was exactly what I needed to be. The mug of black coffee in my hand was hot, grounding me in the present moment. I took a sip, letting the bitterness wake up my senses. Behind me, the soft hum of cooling fans was the only sound in the room. It was a white noise that I found more soothing than any ocean wave or forest breeze. On my desk, 3 curved monitors glowed with the comforting rhythm of my work. Lines of green syntax cascaded down the black screens like digital rain. To the untrained eye, it was chaos. To me, it was poetry. I was an architect. But I did not build with bricks or wood. I built with logic. I constructed security systems, digital vaults, and invisible walls that kept the world's most valuable data safe. I turned back to the monitors, setting my coffee down on a slate coaster. The code I was currently auditing belonged to a government contractor, a project so sensitive that I had to sign non-disclosure agreements that were thicker than a novel. This was my life now. Silence, focus, control. It was a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. My mind drifted, as it often did when the silence became too heavy. Back to Mark, my husband. He had been a good man. I truly believed that. He had a kind heart and a smile that could disarm you in seconds. But goodness, I had learned the hard way, was not the same thing as strength. Mark was soft. He was pliable. He was a man who had never learned to sever the umbilical cord. A man who had spent 40 years of his life apologizing for his own existence to a mother who demanded worship rather than love. Regina. Just thinking her name made the muscles in my neck tighten. Mark had died of a heart attack 3 years ago, collapsing right in the middle of a Sunday dinner at his mother's house. The stress of trying to please her, of trying to balance the impossible debt she had encouraged him to take on, had finally caused his heart to give out. I grieved him. I truly did. But beneath the grief, there was a layer of relief so profound it made me feel guilty for months. With Mark gone, the tether to his family was supposed to be cut, but they did not see it that way. Regina and her daughter, Courtney, believed they were the victims of Mark's death. They believed the world owed them compensation, and specifically, they believed I owed them. They thought I had bought this property using Mark's life insurance. It was a narrative they had constructed and spread to anyone who would listen. The poor, grieving mother and sister, left with nothing, while the heartless widow took the blood money and ran off to the mountains to live in luxury. The truth was far more clinical. Mark's life insurance had been barely enough to cover the debts he had hidden from me, debts accrued from bad investments Regina had bullied him into, and loans to Courtney that were never repaid. By the time I settled his estate, the balance was zero. No one in that family knew who I really was. They saw Summer the housewife, who tapped away at a laptop in the corner. They thought I was playing games or doing low-level data entry. They had no idea that I was one of the lead developers for the encryption protocols used by Nebula Systems. They did not know that 6 months ago. I had sold a proprietary security algorithm to Nebula Systems for a sum that would make Regina's eyes roll back in her head. I bought the Alps with my own money, every square inch of concrete, every server rack, every acre of pine forest was paid for by my brain, my sleepless nights, and my code. This house was not a retreat for a grieving widow, it was a command center. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, my fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard. The tactile click of the keys was satisfying as I resumed my work. I needed this isolation. My work required a level of concentration that could not be achieved in a suburban cul-de-sac where neighbors mowed lawns at 7 in the morning and solicitors rang doorbells at noon. Here, the only visitors were the occasional elk or a wandering black bear. The silence was absolute. It was a physical weight, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I cherished it. I protected it. And then, the vibration started. It was subtle at first, a low tremor that I felt through the floor soles of my feet, rather than heard. Then came the sound. It was the distinct guttural roar of a heavy-duty diesel engine. It was not the smooth hum of a delivery van or the chop of a ranger's helicopter. It was a grinding, mechanical noise that tore through the serenity of the pine forest like a chainsaw through silk. I stopped typing. My hands froze in midair. My heart rate spiked. Not out of fear, but out of confusion. The access road to my property was private. It was gated, locked, and marked with signs that clearly stated no trespassing in 3 different languages. No one came here by accident. The GPS coordinates for this location did not even appear on standard commercial maps. The roar grew louder, accompanied by the hiss of air brakes. Whoever it was, they were big, and they were right outside. Suddenly, the room was filled with a soft, synthetic chime. A calm, gender-neutral voice echoed from the hidden speakers in the ceiling. It was the AI integrated into my security system. Alert! Unknown intrusion at the main gate. Proximity sensors active. Vehicle classification. Commercial moving truck. A moving truck? I frowned, pushing my chair back. I stood up and walked over to the main control panel on the wall. I tapped the screen, bringing up the live feed from the external cameras. The high-definition video loaded instantly, crisp and clear despite the distance to the main gate. My breath hitched in my throat. There, idling aggressively in front of my custom-forged steel gates, was a massive rental moving truck. But it was not the truck that made my blood run cold. It was the black SUV parked right behind it. I zoomed in on the passenger seat of the SUV. The camera's autofocus adjusted, locking onto the face of the woman sitting inside. Even through the digital screen, the sight of her was visceral. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, but I would recognize that jawline anywhere. It was set in a permanent expression of dissatisfaction. Her lips were painted a bright, aggressive shade of red, a color she claimed showed dominance. Regina, and in the driver's seat, holding a phone up as if she were filming, was Courtney. She was laughing, her mouth moving rapidly as she likely narrated their arrival to an invisible audience on social media. I stared at the screen, unable to process the sheer audacity of what I was seeing. They were not just visiting. You do not bring a 20-foot moving truck for a social call. They had luggage, they had furniture, they had the terrifying, unshakable confidence of people who believed they owned the world and everyone in it. They had found me. I watched as Courtney rolled down the window and reached for the intercom button on the gate post. She pressed it repeatedly. Her face twisted in annoyed entitlement when the gate did not magically swing open the moment she arrived. "Open up!" I could almost hear Regina screeching from the passenger seat. Even though the audio feed was muted, A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The peace I had spent millions of dollars to secure, the sanctuary I had built to heal from the trauma of their toxicity, was about to be breached. They thought they were arriving at a vacation villa. They thought they were coming to claim their inheritance. They thought they were going to walk in here and resume the dynamic where I was the servant, and they were the masters. I looked down at my clothes. I was wearing faded cargo pants and a black tank top. My arms smeared with a bit of thermal paste from when I had been servicing one of the server blades earlier that morning. I did not look like the owner of a multi-million-dollar estate. I looked like a technician. I looked like the help. A grim smile touched my lips. Regina and Courtney had driven hundreds of miles to invade my life. They had come to take what they believed was theirs, but they had made a fatal miscalculation. They had forgotten that Summer Lamberton, the quiet girl who used to serve them tea and apologize for the weather, was dead. The woman watching them from the other side of the camera was the architect of this fortress. I reached out and pressed the button to enable the audio feed. "Ridiculous that she makes us wait," Regina's voice crackled through the speakers, shrill and distorted. "It is freezing out here. When I get inside, I'm going to have a serious talk with her about respect. After all, it is Mark's money that bought those gates." "Totally," Courtney added, adjusting the angle of her phone. "Guys, we are literally at the gate of our new family villa in the Alps. It is going to be insane. Stay tuned for the house tour." I watched them for 1 second longer, letting the anger crystallize into something useful, something cold. "Athena," I said, my voice steady. "Disengage the primary lock. Let them in." "Confirming," the AI replied. "Main gate opening." On the screen, the heavy steel gates began to slide apart. I saw Regina clap her hands in triumph. She thought she had won. She thought the doors were opening to welcome her home. She had no idea she was walking straight into the machine. The engine of the moving truck finally cut out, leaving a ringing silence that was immediately filled by the slamming of car doors. I watched from the monitor for a moment longer, my hand hovering over the console. They were not waiting for an invitation. Before I had even stepped away from my desk, I saw Regina gesturing imperiously to the 2 men in the truck cab. She was pointing at the paved landing area in front of my massive steel front doors. Her mouth moving in rapid, sharp commands. She was ordering them to unload. She was moving in before she had even said hello. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. I had been in the middle of a hardware swap on the secondary server rack, and my hands were stained with gray thermal paste and dust. My cargo pants were smeared with oil, and my black tank top was sticking to my back. I looked nothing like the mistress of a grand estate. I looked like a mechanic, and frankly, that was exactly how I wanted to look. I walked through the secure corridor that connected the server farm to the front entryway. The air here was cooler, filtered and pressurized. I did not hurry. I let them wait. I let them stand in the biting mountain wind for a full 2 minutes before I finally approached the main entrance, when I punched the code into the keypad and the heavy, reinforced steel door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The scene that greeted me was almost comical in its arrogance. Regina was standing there, wrapped in a white faux fur coat that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of raw concrete and pine trees. She looked like she was dressed for a photo shoot in Aspen. Not a visit to a remote high-security facility. Courtney was right beside her, holding her phone up at arm's length, the screen glowing with the interface of a live stream. They stopped mid-sentence as the door opened. Regina looked me up and down, her lip curling in immediate distaste. There was no hug. There was no hello. There was just a cold, critical scan of my dirty clothes and messy hair. "Good Lord. Summer," Regina said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We have been standing out here freezing while you play dress-up in the garage. Look at you. You look like a janitor." She stepped forward, expecting me to move aside. I did not move. I planted my feet on the metal threshold, blocking her path. "Regina," I said, my voice flat. "Courtney, you are a long way from the suburbs," Regina scoffed, waving a gloved hand dismissively, as if she were shooing away a fly. Do not be dramatic, Summer. It is a drive, certainly, but for this view, it is worth it. She turned her head, looking past me into the dimly lit foyer. Now, tell those movers where to put the antique armoire. I do not want it scratched. It has been in the family for 50 years. I stared at her. The movers are not bringing anything inside. Regina paused, her eyes narrowing. For a second, the mask slipped, revealing the sheer predatory nature beneath. But she quickly plastered a fake, pitying smile back onto her face. Oh, honey, do not be difficult. We are here to help. She took another step, invading my personal space. I know how hard it has been for you since Mark passed, 3 years, and you have just been drifting. When we heard you bought this place, well, we knew immediately. You cannot manage a property this size alone. You need family. You need guidance. I did not ask for help, I said, my eyes tracking Courtney, who was now panning her phone around, capturing the exterior of the building. Hey guys, Courtney chirped, her voice pitched up an octave for her digital audience. So, we finally made it. This is the new family vacation home I told you about. Look at this brutalist architecture. It is so trendy right now. Very Kanye West vibes, right? We are literally in the middle of the mountains. Private retreat. #luxury life. She turned the camera toward me, and I instinctively turned my face away. And there is Summer, Courtney laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. She is doing some renovations, obviously, hence the outfit. Say hi to the squad. Summer. Turn that off, Courtney, I said. It was not a request. It was a command. Courtney rolled her eyes but lowered the phone slightly, though I could see the recording indicator was still flashing. Chill out. I am just showing them the vibe. Everyone is super jealous that we have a place in the Alps. The Alps is the name of the building, I corrected her, fighting the urge to snatch the phone from her hand. It is not a resort, and it is not a family home. Regina sighed, a long theatrical exhale that suggested she was dealing with a petulant child. She pushed past me, her shoulder checking mine with surprising force. I stumbled slightly, not expecting physical contact, and she used that moment to step into the foyer. Stop this nonsense, Regina snapped, her voice echoing off the bare concrete walls of the entryway. We know you used Mark's life insurance to buy this. That money was meant to take care of his family, all of his family. You ran off with it. Summer, you abandoned us. But we are willing to forgive that. We are here now. We are going to turn this place into something respectable, something worthy of the Lamberton name. She looked around the foyer, and her brow furrowed. It was not a welcoming space. There was no coat rack, no warm rug, no welcoming bench. It was a decontamination airlock. Essentially, the floor was metal grating, and the walls were lined with keycard readers and biometric scanners. The lighting was stark, clinical white LED strips embedded in the floor. It is a bit industrial, Regina critiqued, wrinkling her nose. But we can fix that. Some Persian rugs, maybe some warm lighting. We will need to get rid of this metal floor. It looks like a prison. I stepped back inside, the heavy door hissing shut behind me, sealing us in. The sound made Regina jump. You are not listening, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You assume this place was bought with Mark's money. Mark did not have any money. Regina, Mark died with $40,000 in credit card debt and a second mortgage you convinced him to take out to fund Courtney's failed boutique. The life insurance check was exactly enough to pay off the creditors so they did not come after the house I was living in. This place? This has nothing to do with Mark. Regina turned on me, her eyes flashing with anger. Do not lie to me. My son was a successful businessman. He provided for you. And this is how you repay his memory? By rewriting history? By hiding his fortune in the middle of nowhere and pretending you earned it? She laughed, a harsh barking sound. You? Earn this? Summer, you fixed computers for a living. You were a tech support girl. Do not insult my intelligence. We know you cashed out big. And frankly, legally, half of that insurance should have come to his mother. I raised him. I made him the man he was. You made him a nervous wreck who died at 42, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The silence that followed was heavy. Courtney actually stopped typing on her phone. Regina's face turned a mottled shade of red beneath her heavy foundation. "How dare you?" she whispered. "I am here to save you from your own selfishness. I am here to make sure this family stays together, whether you like it or not. We have sold the house in the city. Summer, we have nowhere else to go. So you can drop the attitude, show us to our suites, and have the staff bring in our luggage. We are staying." I stared at her, stunned by the confession she had just dropped so casually. They had sold their house. This was not a visit. This was an invasion. They were broke, homeless, and looking for a new host to attach themselves to. "You sold your house?" I repeated. "It was too big for just the two of us," Regina said quickly, waving her hand, "and the market was hot. It made sense to consolidate our assets. We are going to invest the capital here, help you develop this place, maybe turn it into a high-end retreat center. Courtney has great ideas for marketing." "I am thinking yoga retreats for billionaires," Courtney chimed in, stepping closer. "Or like a digital detox center, but with Wi-Fi, obviously." "This is not a retreat center," I said, stepping between them and the double doors that led to the inner sanctum. "This is a secure data facility. It is a workspace. There are no guest suites. There are no bedrooms for you. You cannot be here." Regina's eyes darted to the double doors behind me. They were 12 feet tall, made of reinforced steel, with no handles, only a biometric scanner on the wall. She looked at them with a hunger that made my skin crawl. She saw dollar signs. She saw a mansion. She saw the lifestyle she believed she was owed. "Get out of the way. Summer," Regina warned. "I am tired. I want to sit down. I want a glass of wine. And I want to see the living room." "There is no living room," I said, pressing my back against the cold steel of the doors. "Beyond this point is a restricted area. It requires federal clearance to enter. If you go through these doors, you are not entering a home. You are breaching a secure perimeter." Regina rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop with the spy novel nonsense. Federal clearance? Please, it is a house. You probably just have not cleaned it yet, and you are embarrassed." She reached out, her hand aiming for my shoulder again. "Move." "I am serious." "Regina," I said, grabbing her wrist. Her skin was cold, her pulse racing. "Do not do this. You are not welcome here. Turn around, get back in the truck, and leave. I will pay for a hotel in Denver for one night. That is the only offer you are going to get." "A hotel?" Regina shrieked, yanking her arm back. "I am your mother. This is my son's house. I have rights." She lunged forward. I could have stopped her. I knew 3 different ways to incapacitate someone of her size without causing permanent damage. But a part of me, a dark, cold part, that had been forged in the silence of this mountain, wanted her to see. I wanted her to understand the magnitude of her mistake. So I let her push me. I stumbled aside, feigning weakness. Regina triumphed. Her face twisted in a victorious sneer. She reached for the biometric scanner, confused for a moment when there was no handle. But then she just slammed her palms against the metal doors. "Open!" she screamed, channeling all her rage and entitlement into the command. I silently triggered the release mechanism from the remote in my pocket. The heavy steel doors unlocked with a deafening clank that echoed like a gunshot. The hydraulics engaged, and the massive doors began to swing inward slowly, revealing the darkness beyond. Regina stepped back, adjusting her coat, a smug smile playing on her lips. "See? Was that so hard? Now, let us see what you have been hiding." She grabbed Courtney's arm, and together, they marched across the threshold, their heels clicking sharply on the floor. They walked with their heads high, expecting crystal chandeliers, velvet sofas, and a roaring fireplace. They expected a palace. They were walking straight into the belly of the beast. The air that rushed out to meet them was not warm and scented with vanilla. It was frigid, dry, and smelled of ozone and electrified copper. I stayed in the foyer, watching their silhouettes as they stepped into the vast, humming void of the great hall. I did not follow them immediately. I wanted to give them a moment. I wanted the reality to hit them before I said another word. "Welcome home," I whispered to the empty air, the sarcasm bitter on my tongue. The door swung fully open, and the light from the foyer spilled into the room ahead, illuminating not a grand staircase, but the first row of black, towering monoliths that hummed with the power of 1,000 minds. Regina stopped. Her bag slipped from her shoulder. The invasion had begun. But the invaders had no idea they had just stepped onto a battlefield where their weapons, guilt, manipulation, and social pressure were completely useless. They were in my world now, and in my world, logic ruled, and sentiment was a vulnerability I had patched a long time ago. The silence that followed their entry was not the stunned silence of awe. It was the paralyzed silence of a brain failing to process visual data that completely contradicted its expectations. Regina stood frozen on the threshold of the great hall. Her mouth was slightly open, a perfect O of confusion that would have been comical if her intentions were not so predatory. Beside her, Courtney held her phone aloft, but her arm had gone slack, the camera tilting downward as she stared blankly ahead. They had expected a foyer that opened into a sprawling living space. They had anticipated vaulted ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers that caught the mountain light. They had imagined a massive stone fireplace, perhaps big enough to stand in, with a roaring fire crackling behind an iron grate. They had pictured plush velvet sofas in deep jewel tones, Persian rugs soft enough to sleep on, and walls lined with expensive art or perhaps hunting trophies that suggested old money. They were prepared to walk into a scene from a lifestyle magazine, a place where they could instantly visualize themselves sipping champagne and hosting galas. Instead, they had walked into a machine. The Great Hall was indeed massive. It spanned the entire width of the main structure, a cavernous space with a ceiling that soared 30 feet high. But there was no drywall, no crown molding, and certainly no chandeliers. The ceiling was a maze of exposed industrial ductwork, silver and imposing, designed to cycle air with the efficiency of a jet engine, and below it, occupying the space where a living room should have been, were the rows. 6 rows of server racks, towering 8 feet high, dominated the floor. They were black, sleek, and pulsed with a rhythmic, alien life. Thousands of tiny LED lights blinked in synchronized patterns of green, amber, and blue. They looked like the eyes of a swarm of insects in the dark. Watching the intruders, the sound was the first thing that seemed to physically hit Regina. It was not the crackle of a fire. It was a low, resonant drone, a constant, unyielding hum of hundreds of cooling fans spinning at high velocity, mixed with the faint, insect-like clicking of hard drives reading and writing data. It was a sound that vibrated in your teeth. To me, it was the sound of productivity. To Regina, judging by the way she raised her manicured hands to cover her ears, it was torture. The air was not warm. It was aggressively climate-controlled, kept at a constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit, with low humidity to protect the hardware. It carried a distinct scent. There was no lavender, no vanilla, no expensive potpourri masking the smell of living. The air smelled of ozone, ionized dust, and hot copper. It smelled of electricity. It was a sterile, sharp scent that stung the nose and tasted metallic on the tongue. I walked up behind them, moving silently on the rubberized, anti-static mats that lined the walkways. I stopped just a few feet away, leaning against a support pillar of raw, unpainted concrete. "It takes a moment for the eyes to adjust," I said, my voice cutting through the hum. Regina spun around. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and frantic. She looked back at the room, then at me, then back at the room. She was looking for the joke. She was waiting for a curtain to drop or a hidden wall to slide away and reveal the real house. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Then, louder, shrill with rising panic. "What in God's name is this? Summer?" "This," I gestured vaguely to the rows of flashing lights. Is the reason I can afford to pay the property taxes. Courtney finally seemed to reboot. She looked down at her phone screen. I could see the comments rolling in on her live stream. Her followers were confused. They were asking if she was in a factory, a warehouse, or a prison. The narrative of the luxury villa was collapsing in real time. "Mom," Courtney said, her voice whining. "This is ugly. It looks like a basement. Where's the furniture? Where are the sofas?" She panned the camera around, trying to find a flattering angle, but there were no angles here for a fashion influencer. The furniture in the center of the room consisted of 4 modular workstations. Heavy, steel-framed tables bolted to the floor. They were cluttered with soldering irons, tangled nests of Cat6 cables, dismantled circuit boards, and empty cans of energy drinks. There were no decorative vases, just monitors, walls of monitors. Regina stepped forward, her high heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. She walked toward the nearest workstation. Her face twisted in disgust. "You live in a garage," she spat out. "You brought us to a garage." "It is a data center," I corrected her. "I do not care what you call it," Regina screamed, her voice echoing painfully off the hard surfaces. "Where is the house? Where do we sleep? Where is the dining room? I saw the outside. The building is huge. You cannot tell me the whole thing is filled with these refrigerators." She gestured wildly at a rack of blade servers worth more than her entire life's earnings. "It is mostly infrastructure," I said calmly. "About 90% of the square footage is dedicated to the servers, the cooling systems, and the backup generators. The residential wing is small, efficient." Regina looked like she was about to be sick. She clutched her handbag to her chest, as if it were a shield against the ugliness of utility. Suddenly, a movement in the shadows of the 3rd row caught her eye. Regina gasped and jumped back, colliding with Courtney. "There is someone there!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. From behind a bank of monitors, a figure emerged. It was not a butler in a tuxedo. It was not a maid in a crisp uniform. It was a man who looked like he had just walked out of a heavy metal concert. He was wearing a black hoodie with the sleeves ripped off, revealing arms completely covered in intricate, dark tattoos. His hair was long, tied back in a messy bun, and he wore thick, oversized safety goggles pushed up onto his forehead. He held a tablet in one hand and a half-eaten protein bar in the other. He looked at Regina, then at Courtney, and finally at me. He did not smile. He did not bow. He looked annoyed. "Summer," he grunted, his voice deep and gravelly. "Zone 4 thermal sensors are spiking again. Is it the door? Did you leave the airlock open?" "We have guests, Jax," I said dryly. The door was open for approximately 45 seconds. Jax looked at Regina as if she were a piece of malware that had bypassed the firewall. He did not see a woman. He saw a heat source that was disrupting his delicately balanced ecosystem. "Guests," he repeated, the word tasting like vinegar in his mouth. He looked at Regina's fur coat. "Shedding risk. High static potential." Regina stared at him, her mouth agape. "Who is this?" she demanded, turning to me. "Your gardener? Why is he inside? Why does he look like a convict?" Jax snorted, a short, derisive sound. He turned his back on her without a word, returning his attention to the monitors. "He is not a gardener," I said. "He is the lead network security architect, and he is paid more in a month than Mark made in 2 years. Regina flushed a deep, angry crimson. "Do not speak about my son like that. Mark was a professional. This person is a thug." Courtney, meanwhile, had come to a realization. She looked at the bleak, industrial background on her phone screen. She looked at Jax, who was ignoring her. She looked at the lack of anything remotely glamorous. "I cannot post this," she muttered, panic rising in her voice. "This looks like a horror movie set. My engagement is going to tank." She hurriedly tapped the screen, ending the live stream. "Sorry, guys. Bad connection." She lied to the air, before shoving the phone into her pocket. She looked at me with genuine betrayal in her eyes. "Summer, Seriously? You hyped this place up? I never hyped anything, I said. You did. You assumed. I told you I bought a property. I never said I bought a resort. Regina marched back to me, her face inches from mine. The smell of her heavy floral perfume clashed violently with the ozone scent of the room. You did this on purpose, she hissed. You knew we were coming. I did not know you were coming until 5 minutes ago, I reminded her. You bought this monstrosity just to spite us. She swept her arm around the room. You took Mark's legacy, the money that should have secured the future of this family, and you spent it on a warehouse full of junk? Look at this place. It is cold. It is loud. It is hideous. She kicked the base of a server rack with the toe of her boot. Do not do that, I said, my voice dropping to a warning tone. That junk is processing data for 3 major hospitals and a logistics firm right now. If you disrupt it, you will be liable for damages in the millions. Regina laughed, a high, hysterical sound. Millions? You are delusional. You are living in a fantasy world. Summer, you think you are some kind of tech genius? You are a sad, lonely woman playing with toys in a bunker because you could not handle being a real wife. She walked over to one of the workstations and picked up a stray piece of wire, holding it up like a piece of evidence. This is what you traded us for? She asked, tears of rage welling in her eyes. You could have bought a beautiful home in the Hamptons. You could have invested in Courtney's brand. We could have lived together, properly. But no, you chose this. You chose to live like a rat in a cage. I chose to work, I said. This is a place of business. Regina, welcome to Backup Data Headquarters number 4. It is not a home, it is a fortress, and frankly, it is not designed for visitors. Well, you have visitors now. Regina slammed the wire down on the table. And we are not going anywhere. We sold our house. Summer, do you understand? We have nowhere else to go. You have to fix this. You have to make this place livable. She looked around the vast, hostile room, her eyes darting frantically, looking for a solution that did not exist. We need to call a decorator, she muttered, more to herself than to me. We can put up curtains, thick velvet curtains to hide these ugly machines. We can bring in carpets. We can turn off these noisy fans. You cannot turn off the fans, I said. The servers will overheat and melt. Then let them melt, Regina screamed, finally losing the last shred of her composure. I do not care about your stupid computers. I care about my comfort. I am your mother-in-law. I am the matriarch of this family. You will treat me with respect, and you will give me a proper room. The sound of her scream echoed through the hall. Bouncing off the concrete and steel, the humming of the servers seemed to deepen in response, an indifferent mechanical beast that cared nothing for her human tantrums. Jack stood up again from his station in the back. He did not look at Regina. He looked at me. He tapped his wrist, signaling the time. Summer, he called out, his voice cutting through Regina's heavy breathing. Client meeting in 20 minutes. Do you want me to escort the unauthorized personnel to the perimeter? Regina gaped at him. Unauthorized personnel? I am family. I looked at Regina. She was shaking, a mix of cold and rage. She looked small against the backdrop of the towering machines. She looked obsolete. You are right, Regina, I said softly. Family should be together, but you need to understand something very clearly. I took a step closer to her, forcing her to look me in the eye. Mark is dead, and the Summer you knew died with him. The woman standing in front of you is not your daughter-in-law. She is the CEO of this facility, and right now, you are trespassing in a high-security zone. Regina stared at me, her mouth working but no sound coming out. For the first time since she arrived, the arrogance in her eyes flickered. She looked at the cold, unfeeling lights of the servers. She looked at the dark, industrial ceiling, and she realized, with a dawning horror, that there was no guest bedroom waiting for her. There was no warm tea. There was only the cold, hard reality of the world she had tried to ignore. But, she stammered, her voice small, But we have all our luggage in the truck. Keep it there, I said. You will not be needing evening gowns here. I turned and began to walk toward the back of the hall, toward the secure door that led to the residential sliver. Follow me, I commanded, not looking back. If you want a roof over your head tonight, you will have to lower your standards, significantly. Behind me, I heard the click of heels on concrete as they hurried to catch up. The sound echoing like the ticking of a clock counting down to a disaster. They hated it. They despised every inch of it. But the mountain wind was howling outside and inside, despite the cold. It was shelter, and for people who had burned every bridge they ever crossed. Shelter was the only currency that mattered. We walked down a long, sterile corridor that felt more like the interior of a submarine than a hallway in a home. The walls were brushed steel, and the floor was a continuation of that cold, hard concrete that Regina despised so much. There were no family photos on the walls, no decorative sconces, only flush-mounted emergency lighting and the occasional fire extinguisher. I stopped in front of a modest door that looked exactly like every other door in the facility. "This is my room," I said, placing my palm on the scanner. The lock disengaged with a solid thud. I pushed the door open to reveal my sanctuary. It was a studio, barely 600 square feet. It contained a single bed with gray linens, a small kitchenette that looked like it belonged in a spacecraft, and a wall of books. That was it. No walk-in closet, no vanity, no chaise lounge. Regina peered inside, her eyes scanning the small space with a mixture of confusion and horror. She looked for the door that led to the real bedroom, the master suite she imagined I was hoarding for myself. "This is the guest room?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "It is a bit compact, but I suppose for a servant or a temporary guest, it is adequate. Where is your suite? The master wing?" "This is the master wing. Regina," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "This is where I sleep. This is the only private residence in the entire building designed for long-term habitation." Regina looked at me as if I had just spoken in tongues. "You live in a closet? You have millions of dollars. You have an empire. And you sleep in a room smaller than my pantry?" "I sleep in a room that is efficient," I corrected her. "I spend 18 hours a day working. I do not need a ballroom to sleep in. As I told you, 90% of this structure is dedicated to the servers. The machines need space. Humans are secondary." Regina stepped back into the hallway. Shaking her head, the denial was strong. She could not reconcile the massive, brutalist exterior of the Alps with the utilitarian reality of its interior. To her, money meant excess. It meant velvet and gold leaf. She could not comprehend that to me. Money meant the freedom to not care about velvet. "Well, that is simply unacceptable," she declared, smoothing the front of her coat. "If this is how you choose to live, that is your mental illness to deal with. But Courtney and I require proper accommodations. We need a suite, 2 bedrooms, ensuite bathrooms, and preferably a sitting area." "There are no suites," I said, my patience thinning like ice in spring. "Regina, listen to me closely. This is a workplace. I have a dormitory wing for the staff, programmers who pull 40-hour shifts and need to crash. It is functional. It is communal, and it is the only other place with beds." "Communal?" Courtney piped up from behind her mother, looking up from her phone. She had stopped filming, likely realizing that a gray hallway was not going to go viral. "Like a hostel?" "Then leave," I said, gesturing back toward the way we came. "The truck is outside. Drive back to the city, check into the Four Seasons, do whatever you want. But do not stand here and demand luxury in a data center." Regina's face crumbled slightly. The imperious mask slipped, revealing the terrified woman beneath. She looked at Courtney, then back at me. Her hands clenched her designer bag so tightly, her knuckles turned white. "We cannot go back," she whispered, the words barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system. "Why not?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Because the house is gone," she snapped. defensive anger rising to cover her shame. We closed on the sale 3 days ago. The new owners have already moved in. We have the truck for 2 days. After that, we are in between situations. Between situations, I repeated flatly. You mean you are homeless? We are liquid, Regina insisted, her voice rising. We have the capital from the sale. We just have not found the right property yet, and with the market being so volatile, and the debts Mark left us. Mark left you no debts, I cut her off. You put those debts in his name. Do not rewrite history to me, Regina glared, but she did not argue. She knew I knew, and more importantly, she knew she had no leverage. It was 10 degrees below zero outside. The nearest town was 40 miles away on a winding mountain road. They were tired. They were cold. And despite their bravado, they were desperate. Fine, Regina hissed. Show us these dormitories. I led them deeper into the facility, past the secure server rooms and into the west wing. This area was slightly more human, but only just. The lighting was warmer, and the floor changed from concrete to a heavy-duty industrial carpet. We entered the common area of the staff quarters. It was a large open space with a kitchenette on one wall and several long, communal tables in the center. Scattered around were beanbag chairs and ergonomic pods. Sitting at one of the tables was a group of 4 young men and women. They were huddled around laptops, wearing oversized hoodies and headphones. Empty cans of caffeinated sparkling water formed a small pyramid in the center of their table. They did not look up when we entered. They were in the zone. And then there was Jax. He was standing by the kitchenette, drinking water from a massive gallon jug. He had removed his safety goggles, revealing eyes that were sharp, dark, and missed nothing. His muscular frame filled out his black t-shirt in a way that was intimidating rather than aesthetic. He looked like a weapon that had been left leaning against the counter. Regina saw him and immediately straightened her spine. To her, a man in a t-shirt standing in a kitchen was staff, and not just staff, domestic staff. You there, she called out, snapping her fingers at him. The big one. What is your name? Jack slowly lowered the water jug. He turned his head, looking at her with the bored indifference of a lion watching a gazelle that was too far away to chase. Jax, he said, one syllable, heavy as a stone. Jax, Regina repeated, testing the name on her tongue like it was a cheap wine. Well, Jax, we have a situation. My daughter and I are moving in, and our luggage is still in the truck outside. The movers are incompetent idiots. I need you to go out there and supervise them. Make sure they bring the Louis Vuitton trunks to wherever summer is putting us. And be careful with the vanity set. It is mirrored glass. She waved her hand toward the exit. Chop chop, it is freezing out there, so put on a jacket. The silence in the room was absolute. The 4 hackers at the table stopped typing. They looked up, eyes wide, waiting to see if Regina was about to die. Jax did not move. He did not blink. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Did you hear me? Regina demanded, stepping closer. I gave you an instruction. I am Mrs. Lamberton. I am Summer's mother-in-law. Jax looked at me, raising a single eyebrow. Hostile? He asked. Just annoying, I replied. Stand down. Jax. Jax turned back to his water, lifting the jug and taking a long, slow drink, completely dismissing Regina's existence. Regina gasped, her face flushing red. Excuse me? Are you deaf? I told you to get my bags. He is not a porter, Regina, I said, walking over to stand beside Jax. And he is certainly not your servant. Jax is the head of security for this facility. He is a former gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. He has served 3 tours overseas. He is responsible for the physical safety of billions of dollars worth of intellectual property. He does not carry luggage. Regina looked at Jax, then at his tattoos, then at the way he held himself. She shrank back slightly. Well, she huffed, trying to regain her dignity. He looks like a gardener. You really should have staff wear uniforms. It is confusing. I wear what I want, Jack said, his voice low. And if you snap your fingers at me again, I will have you escorted off the property as a security risk. Do you understand? Regina opened her mouth to argue, but something in Jax's eyes stopped her. She clamped her mouth shut and looked away. Whatever, Courtney said, breaking the tension. She was wandering around the room, holding her phone up, looking for a backdrop. This lighting is terrible. It is all fluorescent. I look green. She walked over to a wall that had an interesting industrial texture, thinking it might work for a grungy chic aesthetic. She leaned against it, posing. Careful, one of the hackers called out. It was a young woman with neon blue hair and piercing rings. That panel vibrates. It covers the main power conduit. Unless you want your hair to stand up like Einstein. I would move. Courtney jumped away from the wall, brushing off her expensive coat as if the electricity was contagious. Ugh, is everything in here dangerous? Only if you are stupid, the girl muttered. Turning back to her screen, Regina looked at the group of hackers with open disdain. To her, they looked like unwashed teenagers. They wore baggy clothes. They slouched. They did not fit her image of success. Who are these people? Regina whispered loudly to me. Why are there so many vagrants in your house? Are you running a shelter? They are not vagrants, I said, my voice hardening. This is the Alpha team. That girl you just insulted? That is Pivot. She finished her PhD in cryptography at 19. The guy next to her wrote the code that currently protects your bank account from Russian hackers. They are not homeless. Regina, they are the residents of the Alps. They look like gamers, Regina scoffed. Look at them, hunched over, drinking sugar water. It is pathetic. Summer, you are a Lamberton now. You should be surrounding yourself with culture, with people of status, not these social rejects. I laughed. I could not help it. The irony was so rich it was almost choking me. Status? I asked. Regina, the combined IQ at that table is higher than the population of the town you just moved from. The young man on the left just sold an app for $12 million last week. He is staying here because the Wi-Fi is faster than at his penthouse in San Francisco. Regina looked at the slouching boy in the faded hoodie. He scratched his nose and typed something rapidly. He did not look like he had $12, let alone 12 million. I do not believe you, she said. You are just saying that to make me feel small. I do not need to make you feel small, I said. You are doing a fine job of that yourself. In this house, Regina, we do not care about your last name. We do not care about your designer bag or your ancestors. We care about output. We care about logic. We care about what you can build, not what you can buy. These people are the elite. You are just the noise. I gestured to a set of double doors at the far end of the room. The dorms are through there, I said. Bunk beds, shared bathrooms, showers are on a timer to conserve water. If you want your luggage, you can carry it yourselves. The movers are not allowed past the airlock, and Jax is certainly not going to help you. Bunk beds? Regina repeated faintly. Top or bottom, I said. Pick one, or the truck is still warm. Courtney looked at the room full of geniuses who were ignoring her, then at the scary security guard, and finally at the bleak door to the dorms. I am taking the bottom bunk, Courtney announced, rushing toward the door, dragging her carry-on bag. Mom, you have bad knees. You can climb. Regina stood there for a moment, isolated in the middle of the room. She looked at me with pure hatred. She had come to be the queen. She had been demoted to a refugee. This is temporary, she said, pointing a manicured finger at me. Do not think for a second that I accept this. I will fix this place. I will fix you. Good luck, I said. The code here is hard to crack. She turned and marched after her daughter, the sound of her heels aggressive and loud. When the door to the dorms slammed shut behind her, the room instantly felt lighter. Jax exhaled loudly. Zone 4 is clear of hostiles, he muttered. The girl with the blue hair looked up and grinned. Can we ban them from the subnet? I feel like her energy alone is going to cause a lag spike. Work in progress, I said, smiling for the first time that day. Work in progress. The stainless steel tray hit the metal table with a sharp, resonant clatter that seemed to echo the emptiness of Regina's soul. Dinner was served. We were in the staff canteen, a room that prioritized hygiene and efficiency over comfort. The walls were white subway tiles, scrubbed to a shining finish. The lighting was bright, specifically tuned to keep circadian rhythms alert for the night shift. There were no tablecloths, no candles, and certainly no waiters. Regina looked down at her tray. On it sat a balanced, nutrient-dense meal designed by a nutritionist to fuel high cognitive brain function. A piece of steamed salmon, a scoop of wild rice, broccoli with no butter, and a cup of green tea. She looked at it as if someone had served her a plate of gravel. "This," Regina said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage, "is what you serve to guests?" "This is what everyone eats," I replied. Taking a seat opposite her, I picked up my fork. "It is healthy. It sustains energy. Eat up. The calories are calculated precisely." Courtney poked at the broccoli with a plastic fork. "Is there, wine? Or at least a Diet Coke?" "Filtered water's at the dispenser," I said, pointing to the wall. "Caffeine is restricted after 7 in the evening to ensure quality sleep cycles." Regina slammed her hands down on the table. The noise made the few developers eating in the corner look up briefly before returning to their silent meals. "Enough!" Regina screamed. "I have had enough of this charade. Summer, stop pretending you are running a boot camp. We know the truth." I chewed a piece of salmon slowly, swallowed, and then looked at her. "And what truth is that, Regina?" "That you are hoarding the money," she hissed, leaning across the table. Her eyes were wide, manic with greed and exhaustion. "You are forcing us to sleep in bunk beds and eat prison food while you sit on millions of dollars of my son's money. You are punishing us because you are cheap and vindictive. I want to see the accounts. I want to see the bank statements right now." I set my fork down. The moment had arrived. I had expected this conversation to happen later, perhaps after a day or two, but Regina's entitlement had accelerated the timeline. "You want to talk about finances?" I asked, my voice calm. "Fine, let us talk about finances." I pulled my tablet from my bag and placed it on the table between us. I tapped the screen, bringing up a secure folder labeled Estate Settlement, Mark Lamberton. "You are under the impression," I began, sliding the tablet toward her, "that Mark left me a wealthy woman. You believe the life insurance policy was a windfall. You believe I took that money and bought this facility?" "Of course you did," Regina snapped. "Mark was a vice president. He made 6 figures. The policy was for $2 million. I saw the paperwork years ago." "The policy was for $2 million, I confirmed. "That part is true. But you are conveniently forgetting where the rest of the money went." I swiped on the screen, bringing up a spreadsheet filled with rows of red numbers. "Mark died 3 years ago," I said. "At the time of his death, he had exactly $4,000 in his checking account, and he had liabilities totaling $1,950,000. Regina froze. "That is a lie. Mark was responsible. Mark was a gambler." "Regina," I said, my voice cutting through her denial like a scalpel. "And not just at the casino. He gambled on the stock market. Specifically, he gambled on high-risk futures and penny stocks. Does the name Golden Horizon ring a bell?" Regina flinched. It was a subtle movement, but I caught it. "It should," I continued, "because you were the one who told him to invest in it. You told him your friend at the country club said it was a sure thing. Mark liquidated his 401k. He took out a second mortgage on our house. He borrowed against his credit cards. He put nearly $800,000 into a company that went bankrupt 3 months later. He told me he made a profit," Regina stammered, her face paling. "He lied to you," I said, "just like he lied to me. He was terrified of disappointing you. He spent the last 2 years of his life shuffling debt from one credit card to another, trying to keep up the appearance of the successful son you demanded. When he died, the creditors were days away from seizing everything." I tapped a final figure on the screen. "The insurance payout was $2 million, After paying off the mortgage, the credit card debt, the personal loans, and the tax liens, there was exactly $10,000 left. That paid for his funeral. Regina, the flowers you ordered, the mahogany casket you insisted on, that consumed every last cent of his legacy. Regina stared at the screen, shaking her head. No, this is fabricated. You cooked the books. You are lying to keep it all for yourself. And this building? I gestured to the walls around us. The Alps? This facility cost $4 million to acquire and another $6 million to renovate and equip. Do the math. Regina, even if I had stolen every penny of the insurance, I would not have had enough to buy the front gate. Then where did it come from? She demanded, her voice shrill. If Mark did not pay for this, who did? I did, I said. I told you, I write code. 2 years ago, I developed a proprietary compression algorithm for high-speed data transfer. I sold the exclusive license to the government for use in satellite communications. That deal was worth $12 million. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. I am the rich one. Regina, not Mark, not the Lamberton family. Me, the tech support girl you used to make fun of at Thanksgiving dinners. I bought this place with my brain and my hard work. Mark had nothing to do with it. Regina sat back, looking as if she had been slapped. Her entire worldview, the narrative she had constructed where she was the matriarch of a wealthy dynasty, was crumbling, but denial is a powerful drug. I do not believe you, she whispered, looking away. Mark was a genius. He would never lose money like that. You are just trying to hurt me. Believe what you want, I said, taking a sip of water. But the facts remain. There is no inheritance. There is no secret pile of cash. You are sitting in a building owned 100% by me, funded by me, and sustained by me. While Regina spiraled into delusion, Courtney had gone very quiet. She was not looking at the tablet. She was looking at her fingernails, chipping away at the polish. So, Courtney said, her voice small. So there is really no money? Like zero? Zero, I said. Courtney let out a long, shaky breath. Okay, that is a problem. Why is that a problem, Courtney? I asked. You have your own career, do you not? You are an influencer. You have brand deals. Courtney looked up, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not the superficial annoyance of bad lighting, but real, gut-churning terror. I kind of leveraged my future earnings, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I have $50,000 on my Amex, and I owe another $20,000 to a loan shark. I mean, a private lender. Regina whipped her head around to stare at her daughter. What? Courtney? You told me you were making 6 figures from those vitamins you sell. I lied, okay? Courtney snapped, tears welling in her eyes. Nobody buys the vitamins. Mom, it is a pyramid scheme. I had to buy the inventory myself to keep my rank. And I needed the clothes, the trips, the car to look successful so people would follow me. She turned to me, desperation clawing at her face. Summer, you have to help me. I came here because I thought I could film a reality show. Rich Kids of the Rockies. I thought if I showed off this house, pretended it was ours, I could get a network deal, I could get a sponsorship, I could pay it all back. So that is it, I said, nodding slowly. You did not come to visit family. You came to use my home as a prop to save yourself from bankruptcy. We are family, Courtney cried. You have $12 million. You just said it. $50,000 is nothing to you. Just pay it off. Summer, please, if I do not pay them by next week, they are going to sue me. They will garnish my wages. I will be ruined. I looked at the two of them, a mother who had driven her son to an early grave with her demands for status, and a daughter who was following the exact same path of deception and debt. They were not here to reconcile. They were parasites looking for a new host. They had sucked Mark dry, and now they had latched onto me. But I was not Mark. I did not have a soft underbelly. I was armored in concrete and logic. No, I said, The word hung in the air, heavy and final. "No?" Regina gasped. "She is your sister-in-law. She is in trouble." "She is a 30-year-old woman who spent money she did not have on things she did not need," I said. "I will not pay your debts, Courtney, and I will not give you money, Regina." Regina stood up, knocking her chair back. "Then we are leaving. Come on. Courtney, we do not have to stay here and be insulted by this miser." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "The gate is open, but where will you go? You sold your house. You have no cash. You have a truck full of furniture you cannot afford to store, and Courtney has creditors chasing her." They stopped. The reality of their situation clamped down on them like a vice. They had nowhere to go. They were destitute, and I was their only option. "However," I said, "I am not a monster. I will not throw you out into the snow to freeze." Regina turned back, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I knew it. You are family after all." "I will allow you to stay here," I continued, ignoring her interruption. "For a maximum of 30 days. This will give you time to find jobs in a new apartment." "30 days?" Regina scoffed. "And who is going to pay for our food? Our expenses?" "You are," I said. "We have no money," Courtney wailed. "Then you will earn it," I said. "This is a working facility. Everyone here contributes. There are no passengers on this ship. If you want a bed and 3 meals a day, you will work for them." Regina looked at me as if I had suggested she eat her own shoes. "Work? You expect me to work? I am 60 years old. I am retired." "You are broke," I corrected, "and we are currently short-staffed in the kitchen. The automated dicer is broken, and the chef needs someone to prep vegetables and wash the pots. That is your job, Regina. You start at 6 in the morning." "The kitchen?" Regina choked out. "Washing pots?" "And Courtney." I turned to the girl who was wiping mascara from her cheeks. "You like cleanliness, right? We have a strict protocol for the server rooms. They need to be vacuumed daily with a specialized anti-static backpack vacuum to remove microscopic dust. It is tedious, back-breaking work, and it requires attention to detail. That is your assignment, 8 hours a day." "I am not a janitor," Courtney protested, looking at her manicured nails. "I am a content creator." "Not here you are not," I said. "Here, you are unskilled labor. The rate is $15 an hour. That covers your room and board. Any surplus goes toward your debt." I stood up and gathered my tablet. "Those are the terms," I said, looking down at them. "Kitchen duty for Regina, janitorial duty for Courtney. Take it, or get back in the truck and drive until you run out of gas." Regina looked at the cold, stainless steel tray of food. She looked at the stark white walls. She looked at the terrifying reality of the world outside, where she was nothing but an old woman with bad credit. She slowly, painfully, sat back down. "I will need rubber gloves," Regina whispered, her voice defeated. "My skin is sensitive." "I will ask the chef," I said, turning to walk away. "But I make no promises. Welcome to the workforce, ladies." As I walked out of the canteen, I did not feel triumph. I felt a cold, logical satisfaction. The equation had been balanced. Input equals output. If they wanted to survive in my world, they would have to learn the one lesson they had avoided their entire lives. Nothing is free. The truce lasted exactly 14 hours. I had hoped that the shock of their financial destitution would humble them, or at least frighten them into compliance. I had hoped that the threat of the freezing mountain air and the reality of the bunk beds would force them to keep their heads down, but I had underestimated the sheer, destructive power of Regina's denial. She did not see herself as a bankrupt widow working off a debt. She saw herself as the lady of the manor who was temporarily being subjected to a cruel prank by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. The sabotage began the next morning. Subtle at first, like a slow gas leak before the explosion. I was in my office, monitoring the bandwidth usage for a client in Tokyo. When the first tremor of trouble hit, I had assigned Regina to the kitchen to assist our chef. Marcus, Marcus was a saint of a man, a culinary genius who could make a gourmet meal out of freeze-dried rations. But he had zero tolerance for incompetence. I expected Regina to complain about the peeling of potatoes. I did not expect her to try to redesign the facility. It started with a notification on my primary monitor. Humidity alert. Zone 1. Liquid detected near Rack 7. My stomach dropped. Zone 1 was the Great Hall, the heart of the server farm. There were no water pipes in Zone 1. The fire suppression system used inert gas, not water, because water was the enemy. Water was death to the silicon chips that hummed in those black towers. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and sprinted out of my office. The scene that greeted me in the Great Hall was so absurd, it almost looked staged. Regina was standing in front of Rack 7, one of the most critical units housing the encrypted backups for a major pharmaceutical company. She was wearing the industrial apron I had given her, but she had tied it loosely around her waist like a fashion accessory. In her hands, she held a large, crystal pitcher filled to the brim with water. Sticking out of the pitcher were several branches of pine and wild sage she must have scavenged from the perimeter. She was attempting to balance this leaking, sloshing arrangement on top of the server rack. "Regina!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. She jumped, and the pitcher wobbled dangerously. Water sloshed over the rim, dripping down the side of the black metal cabinet, inches away from the ventilation intake fans. "Don't shout! Summer!" Regina scolded, steadying the pitcher. "You are going to startle me. I am just trying to bring a little life into this mausoleum. It is so sterile in here. A little greenery. Some fresh mountain water changes the whole energy, don't you think?" "Put it down," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "Put it on the floor, slowly." "On the floor?" Regina scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Nobody puts flowers on the floor. They need to be at eye level. This black box is the perfect height for a pedestal." She went to slide the heavy pitcher toward the center of the server rack. "Liquid detection." "Critical," the AI voice announced from the ceiling speakers, loud and authoritative. "Emergency shutdown sequence initiated for Rack 7. The lights on the server rack turned from a steady green to a flashing, angry red. The fans revved up to maximum speed, sounding like a jet engine preparing for takeoff, trying to blow any potential moisture away from the circuits. Regina shrieked as the noise blasted her in the face. "What is happening? Make it stop!" "You are killing the machine!" I yelled, running toward her. But Jax was faster. He appeared from the shadows of the western corridor like a wraith. He did not yell. He did not negotiate. He moved with the terrifying efficiency of a man trained to neutralize threats. Jax vaulted over a low workstation, landed silently, and in one fluid motion, he reached Regina. He did not grab the pitcher. He grabbed Regina. He hooked his arm around her waist and physically lifted her off the ground, swinging her body away from the server rack just as the pitcher tipped over. The water splashed harmlessly onto the anti-static floor mat where Regina had been standing a second ago, if she had still been there, or if the pitcher had fallen the other way. Gallons of water would have poured directly into the intake fans, frying millions of dollars of hardware instantly. "Let me go! Let me go!" Regina screamed, kicking her legs in the air. "He is assaulting me! Summer, call the police!" Jax ignored her. He carried her like a sack of cement, walking briskly toward the airlock doors. He deposited her in the foyer, setting her down firmly but without unnecessary violence. "Zone 1 is a dry zone," Jack said, his voice flat. "No liquids, no unauthorized organic matter. Read the signs." Regina smoothed her apron, her face purple with indignation. "I was decorating. I was trying to make it nice." "You people are savages." I walked up to her, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the urge to strangle her. I pointed at the puddle of water on the floor of the Great Hall, where a maintenance drone was already rolling out to suction it up. "That rack holds the research data for a cancer drug," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If that water had gone inside, years of work would have been lost. Years. Regina, You almost destroyed something that saves lives because you wanted to put up a flower arrangement. Well, maybe if you had a proper living room, I wouldn't have to improvise, Regina yelled back, refusing to take responsibility. This is your fault for making us live in a factory. I was about to evict her. I was about to tell her that the deal was off, that she could take her chances with the snow and the wolves. But before I could speak, the door to the eastern server aisle burst open. Leo, my youngest junior developer, came running out. He looked panicked. Leo was 22, brilliant, and usually so shy he could barely make eye contact. But right now, he was pale and pointing back toward the aisle. "Summer," Leo shouted. "You need to come. Now. It is the other one. The sister." I closed my eyes for a brief second, inhaling the ozone-scented air. "Watch her," I said to Jax, pointing at Regina. "Do not let her leave the foyer." I followed Leo into the eastern aisle. This section of the facility was even more sensitive than the Great Hall. It housed the dedicated servers for my government contracts. The security here was level 4. I found Courtney standing in the narrow walkway between two humming rows of supercomputers. She was supposed to be vacuuming. The specialized backpack vacuum was strapped to her shoulders, and the hose was in her hand. But the machine was turned off. Instead, she was holding her phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at one of the maintenance monitors. The monitor was active. It was displaying a scrolling log of data packets, encrypted headers, IP addresses, and routing protocols for a secure defense network. To a layperson, it looked like gibberish from a sci-fi movie. To a hacker, or a foreign intelligence agency, it was a roadmap to a back door. Courtney was filming it. She was panning her phone back and forth, narrating. "So this is the secret sauce, guys," I heard her say, her voice echoing in the narrow space. "Look at all this code. It is like the Matrix in here. Summer acts like it is so boring, but I bet this is worth a fortune. Maybe I can find some alien secrets. Hashtag Area 51 vibes." She moved closer to the screen, zooming in on a string of alphanumeric coordinates. "Courtney!" I barked. She jumped, nearly dropping her phone. She spun around, a guilty smile plastered on her face. "Oh, hey, Summer," she said, trying to act casual. "Just, taking a break. Vacuuming is super tiring." "Give me the phone," I said. I held out my hand. Courtney pulled the phone against her chest. "What? No. It is my phone. You cannot take my personal property." "You are filming in a restricted area," I said, taking a step forward. "You are filming classified data. Give me the phone. Courtney, now." "It is just for my story," Courtney argued, backing away. "Nobody can read this stuff anyway. It is just numbers. I need content. Summer, my engagement is dropping because I haven't posted in 24 hours. I am losing followers." "You are about to lose your freedom," I said. "Leo, lock the doors." Leo tapped a command on his tablet. The magnetic locks on either end of the aisle slammed shut with a heavy thud. Courtney looked at the doors, then at me, her eyes widening. "You are trapping me?" she squeaked. "This is false imprisonment." "This is containment," I said. I did not wait for her to hand it over. I stepped into her personal space and snatched the phone from her hand. "Hey," she yelled, swiping at me with her manicured nails. "Give that back." I ignored her. I unlocked the phone. She had not even changed the passcode from the default I had seen her use 1,000 times, and went straight to the gallery. There were 6 videos, one of the vacuum cleaner, where she mocked the janitor life, and 5 of the screens. One video zoomed in clearly on a vulnerability patch I was currently writing for the Department of Energy. If that video had gone live, even for a minute, I would have been in breach of contract. I would have lost my clearance. I could have been indicted. I selected all the files. I hit delete. Then I went to the recently deleted folder and wiped them from existence. "You deleted them," Courtney wailed, sinking to the floor. "That was gold. That was going to get me 10,000 likes. I put the phone in my pocket. "Get up." "No," she sobbed. "I hate it here. I hate you." I grabbed her arm and pulled her up. The vacuum cleaner clattered against the server rack. I dragged her out of the aisle, marching her back to the foyer where Jax was standing guard over a fuming Regina. I shoved Courtney toward her mother. The two of them stood there, one wet and angry, the other crying and stripped of her digital validation. "You are monsters!" Regina screamed, wrapping her arms around Courtney. "Look at what you are doing to her. She is a child. She was just having fun. You act like she committed a crime." "She did commit a crime," I said, my voice cold as the mountain wind. "And so did you." "We are victims here," Regina yelled, playing the card she had used her entire life. "You are abusing us. You are making us do slave labor, and when we try to make the best of it, you attack us. I am going to sue you. Summer, I am going to tell the world how you treat your dead husband's family." I looked at them. I looked at their tears, their outrage, their complete and utter lack of comprehension. They thought this was a family drama. They thought this was a dispute over dirty dishes and hurt feelings. It was time to wake them up. "Leo," I said, not taking my eyes off them, "bring up the facility classification documents. Put them on the main screen in the foyer." Leo nodded and typed furiously on his tablet. A moment later, a large monitor embedded in the wall of the foyer flickered to life. A document appeared, stamped with heavy seals and bold headers. "Read it," I said to Regina. Regina squinted at the screen. "I don't care about your computer papers." "Read the header." "Regina," I commanded. She looked. Her eyes scanned the text. "United States Department of Defense Contractor Facility." She read slowly. "Security clearance level 4. Authorized personnel only." She stopped. She blinked. She looked at the next line. "Penalty for unauthorized access, tampering, or dissemination of data. Federal imprisonment of no less than 20 years. Classification: espionage." The color drained from Regina's face so fast she looked like a corpse. Courtney stopped crying. The word espionage hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "This is not a house," I said, stepping closer to them until I was inches away. "This is not a startup. This is a node in the national security infrastructure. When you brought water into that room, Regina, you didn't just risk a computer. You risked the integrity of a federal network. That is sabotage." I turned to Courtney. "And you? You filmed encrypted government code. If you had posted that, the FBI would not have knocked on the door. They would have kicked it down. You wouldn't be in debt. Courtney, you would be in a federal penitentiary waiting for a trial that you would lose." Courtney's knees gave out. She actually slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought it was just tech stuff." "Ignorance is not a defense in a court of law," I said. "And it certainly isn't a defense in my house." Regina looked at Jax. She looked at his tattoos, his military bearing, and suddenly, he didn't look like a gardener anymore. He looked like exactly what he was, a soldier guarding a fortress. "You would send us to jail?" Regina asked, her voice trembling with genuine terror. "We are family. I am protecting you from jail," I said. "If I were anyone else, I would have handed you over to the authorities 10 minutes ago." Jax wanted to call the marshals. I stopped him. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But my patience is finite. The next time you try to decorate, or the next time you point a camera at anything other than your own face, I will not stop him. I will hand over the security footage. I will hand over the logs, and I will testify against you. Do you understand me?" Regina nodded. It was a jerky, terrified motion. For the first time in the 20 years I had known her, she wasn't looking at me with contempt. She was looking at me with fear. She finally understood that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. "Good," I said, standing up straight. "Now, Regina, go back to the kitchen. You have 300 potatoes to peel. Courtney, get back to the server aisle. And if you miss a single speck of dust, you are doing it again." "Yes," Regina whispered. Yes, summer. We will go, Courtney stammered, scrambling to her feet. We are going. They hurried away, moving faster than I had ever seen them move. They didn't look at the walls. They didn't look at the furniture. They kept their eyes on the floor, terrified that if they looked at the wrong thing, the building itself might arrest them. I watched them go, letting out a long breath. My hands were still shaking slightly. You think they learned? Jax asked, coming up beside me. Fear is a good teacher, I said. But it has a short memory. Keep the sensors on high sensitivity. Jax, we are not done yet. Silence is often more dangerous than noise. For 2 days after the incident in the server room, the facility was suspiciously quiet. Regina and Courtney had fallen into a rhythm of compliance that was unnerving. Regina reported to the kitchen at 6 a.m, chopping vegetables with a grim determination. Her complaints reduced to muttered curses under her breath. Courtney vacuumed the server aisles, her head down, looking like a ghost haunting the machine. They were too obedient. They were too quiet. I knew better than to trust this sudden transformation. People like Regina do not learn humility. They only learn to hide their claws until the next opportunity to strike presents itself. I kept my distance, burying myself in the code for the new security patch. But I kept one eye on the internal monitoring systems. I knew they were looking for an angle. I just did not realize how desperate and how delusionally criminal that angle would be until I had to leave the facility for a few hours. I had a mandatory site inspection at the perimeter of the property, where a heavy snowfall had damaged a section of the fiber optic fencing. It was a 3-mile trek on a snowmobile. I would be gone for 2 hours. Athena, I said as I zipped up my thermal suit in the mudroom. Initiate protocol silent watch. Do not engage unless there is a threat to life or hardware, but record everything, audio and visual, high resolution. Acknowledged. The cool voice of the AI replied. Silent watch active. I left the building, the roar of the snowmobile engine fading into the white wilderness. As I later watched on the playback, it took them exactly 12 minutes after my departure to make their move. Regina was in the staff dorms, sitting on the edge of her bunk bed. She was on the phone, huddled over the device like a conspirator. The audio was crystal clear, picked up by the microphone in the smoke detector above her head. Barry, listen to me, she was whispering, her voice trembling with urgency. You have to find something, a loophole, squatters' rights, anything. There was a pause as she listened to the voice on the other end. Barry was the Lamberton family lawyer, a man who operated out of a strip mall and whose primary legal strategy was stalling until the other party gave up. I do not care if the deed is in her name, Regina hissed into the phone. She stole that money. Barry, I know she did. She claims she sold some computer program, but that is nonsense. No one pays $12 million for math. It is Mark's money. She hid it. There has to be a way to freeze her assets. A forensic accounting audit? Yes, demand that. She paused again, her face twisting in frustration. I cannot pay you a retainer right now, Barry, but once we get the house, you will get 10%. Just draft the papers. Scaring her is half the battle. We just need leverage. She hung up the phone and looked at Courtney, who was lying on the top bunk, staring at the ceiling. Barry is useless, Regina spat. He says without proof of fraud, we cannot touch the deed. Courtney rolled over, hanging her head over the side of the bed. So we are stuck here? Scrubbing floors forever? No, Regina said, her eyes narrowing. We just need proof. She's hiding something. Courtney, nobody lives like this unless they are hiding something. All those servers? That security? It is not normal. It is a front. Regina stood up, smoothing her apron. She is gone. The big guard, Jax, is in the gym training. The office is empty. Mom, Courtney warned. She locks the office, and if we get caught... We won't get caught, Regina said, walking to the door. I saw her put the spare keycard in the drawer of the reception desk yesterday. She thinks we are too stupid to notice. I watched the screen as they moved through the hallways. They were surprisingly stealthy, sticking to the shadows, checking corners. They reached the main office, my sanctuary. Regina went to the reception desk in the hallway, opened the drawer, and triumphantly pulled out a white keycard. I smiled grimly at the screen. I had indeed left a keycard there. It was a test, a honeypot, and they had walked right into it. Regina swiped the card. The door to my private office hissed open. They slipped inside and closed the door. My office was a space of organized chaos, with whiteboards covered in diagrams and a large desk piled with schematics. Regina did not care about the diagrams. She went straight for the filing cabinets. "Check the computer," Regina ordered. "I can't," Courtney said, sitting in my chair. "It is password protected, and it has that eye scanner thing." "Then help me look through these papers," Regina snapped, yanking open a drawer. "Look for bank statements, deeds, anything with numbers." They ransacked the room. They pulled out files on server maintenance, electricity bills, and employee contracts, tossing them onto the floor in their haste. It was a violation that made my blood boil, seeing their hands on my work, but I needed to see how far they would go. Then, Regina found it. It was a thick red folder labeled Project Phoenix. "Here," Regina whispered, her eyes widening. "This looks important." Phoenix. That sounds like a code name. She opened the folder. Inside were detailed spreadsheets, transfer records, and profiles of individuals with redacted names. "Look at this," Regina said, tracing a line on the paper with her finger. "Wire transfer, $500,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Another transfer, $200,000 to a shell company in Zurich." Courtney looked over her shoulder. "What is it? Is she hiding money?" "It says, client relocation and identity erasure," Regina read, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Identity erasure? Courtney, do you know what this is?" "No," Courtney said. "It is money laundering," Regina declared, her face lighting up with a twisted sort of joy. "Or worse, she is paying to make people disappear. She is running a criminal enterprise. I knew it. I knew she didn't earn that money legally." I watched them, shaking my head. Project Phoenix was my proudest achievement. It was a non-profit initiative I funded to help victims of severe domestic and economic abuse escape their abusers. The offshore accounts were secure trusts for the victims. The identity erasure was a legal process to help them change their names and SSNs to stay safe. But Regina did not see charity. She saw a mirror of her own greed. She saw illegal cash flows. "We have her," Regina said, clutching the file to her chest. "We finally have her." "What do we do?" Courtney asked. "Call the police?" "No," Regina said sharply. "If we call the police, the government seizes the money, and we get nothing. We use this. We make her pay." Regina paced the room, her energy manic. "We tell her we have the file. We tell her that unless she transfers $5 million into an account of our choosing, we go to the FBI. She will be terrified. She will pay to keep us quiet." "$5 million?" Courtney breathed. "That is a lot." "It is the price of silence," Regina said. "And you help too. If she refuses, we destroy her reputation. Call that reporter friend of yours, the one at the tabloids." Courtney pulled out her phone, a wicked smile spreading across her face. "You mean Jason at the Daily Scandal? He owes me a favor." "Text him," Regina commanded. "Tell him we are living in a house of horrors. Tell him Summer is running a cult. Tell him there are strange noises, illegal activities. Tell him the house is haunted by the ghosts of her victims. Make it juicy. If she doesn't pay, we burn her to the ground." Courtney started typing furiously. "Sending it now. Tech Widow's House of Secrets. He's going to eat this up." They left the office 5 minutes later, carefully placing the file back in the drawer but taking photos of the documents first. They walked out with their heads high, the fear from the previous days replaced by a dangerous, unearned confidence. I returned to the facility an hour later. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow. I parked the snowmobile and walked into the warmth of the airlock. Athena greeted me. "Welcome back," Summer. Incident report generated. 2 unauthorized entries in the main office. Files accessed. Project Phoenix. Thank you. Athena, I said softly. Prepare the conference room and lock down the external network ports. I do not want any emails leaving this building without my approval. I walked into the great hall. Regina and Courtney were sitting at one of the communal tables. They were not working. Regina had abandoned her potatoes. And Courtney had ditched the vacuum. They were drinking tea, their legs crossed, looking like they owned the place. When they saw me, they did not scramble to look busy. They smiled. It was a smug, predatory smile. Summer, Regina said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You are back early. Did you have a nice ride? It was cold, I said, unzipping my jacket. Why are you not in the kitchen? Regina? Dinner prep starts at 4. Oh, I think I am done with peeling potatoes, Regina said, examining her fingernails. In fact, I think Courtney and I are done with all of this manual labor nonsense. Is that so? I asked, walking over to the coffee machine, keeping my back to them. We know, Summer, Courtney said, her voice shaking slightly with excitement. We know about Phoenix. I turned around slowly, holding my mug. I kept my face impassive. Phoenix? Don't play dumb. Regina stood up, pulling a piece of paper from her pocket, a printout of the photo she had taken. We saw the files, the offshore accounts, the identity erasure. We know you are laundering money, maybe for the cartel, maybe for terrorists. Who knows? You broke into my office, I stated. We discovered the truth, Regina corrected. And now, we have a proposition for you. She walked around the table, stopping a few feet from me. You are going to transfer $5 million to us. Consider it a consulting fee or a settlement for the emotional distress you have caused this family. $5 million, I repeated. $5 million, Regina confirmed. Cash, in 24 hours. If the money is not there, I take these photos to the FBI. And Courtney? Courtney held up her phone. I have a draft ready to go to the Daily Scandal. Software tycoon or crime lord. It is already written. I just have to hit send. Your stock prices will crash. Your contracts will be canceled. You will be ruined. Regina crossed her arms, a look of ultimate triumph on her face. So, what is it going to be? Summer? The money? Or prison? I looked at them. I looked at the sheer, breathtaking audacity of their ignorance. They had found the one thing in this building that proved I was a good person, and they had twisted it into a weapon to destroy me. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was trembling inside. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, bitter, and perfect. Athena, I said to the empty air, did you get all that? Affirmative, the AI voice boomed through the hall, making Regina jump. Attempted extortion and blackmail recorded. Audio and video clarity, 100%, evidence logged and time-stamped. Regina looked up at the ceiling, then back at me, her eyes widening. What? What was that? I set my mug down on the table with a definitive click. That, I said, a cold smile finally touching my lips, was the sound of a trap snapping shut. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The large monitor on the wall behind me flared to life. It showed the video of them in my office, rifling through the files. It showed Regina saying, "We use this. We make her pay." It showed Courtney typing the lie to the tabloid. You wanted to find a crime, Regina, I said, walking toward them as they backed away. Congratulations. You just committed one, a felony. In fact, extortion involving a federal contractor, and unlike your imaginary money laundering, this one is recorded in high definition. Regina's face went from smug to gray in a single heartbeat. The victory they thought they had achieved was nothing more than the final nail in their coffin. They had not found my weakness. They had just handed me the weapon I needed to finish this once and for all. The morning of the delegation visit arrived with a sky the color of bruised steel. It was a perfect backdrop for the kind of business we were about to conduct. This was not a social call. This was a critical infrastructure review. The convoy of black SUVs that wound their way up the mountain road carried representatives from Nebula Systems, the massive Silicon Valley conglomerate that licensed my compression algorithms, along with 3 quiet men in gray suits from the Department of Defense. They were here to renew a contract worth $40 million over 5 years. I had spent the morning in preparation mode. The Great Hall had been transformed. The clutter of the workstations was organized. The ambient lighting was adjusted to a professional cool white, and the central display, a massive 100-inch 8K screen, was displaying real-time network topography maps. I was dressed for war, which in my line of work meant a tailored charcoal blazer, dark jeans, and boots that could handle both a boardroom and a blizzard. I had not seen Regina or Courtney since the previous evening. After I had exposed their extortion attempt, they had retreated to the dorms in silence. I assumed they were packing, or perhaps wallowing in the realization that they were facing federal charges. I had instructed Jax to keep them contained in the West Wing until the meeting was over. But I should have known better. I should have known that a narcissist does not retreat when cornered. They attack, and Regina Lamberton was a narcissist of the highest order. At 10 o'clock sharp, the delegation entered the Great Hall. Leading them was Eldon Vance, the CEO of Nebula Systems. Vance was a man of 60, with silver hair and the kind of relaxed power that comes from knowing you can buy a small country if the mood strikes you. "Summer," Vance said, extending a hand. "The place looks even more imposing than the photos. It suits you." "Good to see you." "Eldon," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Welcome to the Alps. I believe you know the gentleman from the department." We moved to the center of the room, where a conference table had been set up. The atmosphere was serious, focused. We began discussing the latency metrics of the new satellite uplink. The men from the government were asking pointed questions about encryption protocols. It was high level, technical, and going perfectly. And then, the doors to the West Wing banged open. It was not a subtle entrance. It was a collision. Regina marched into the Great Hall as if she were entering a ballroom at a debutante gala. She had clearly raided her special occasions trunk. She was wearing a floor-length sequined gown that was entirely inappropriate for the time of day, let alone the setting. She had applied fresh makeup, layers of it, trying to hide the stress lines of the last few days. Her hair was teased into a high, brittle bouffant. Behind her trailed Courtney, phone held high, the ring light attached to the case blindingly bright in the dim hall. "Stop!" Regina shouted, her voice echoing off the concrete walls and drowning out the discussion on packet loss. "Stop this meeting immediately!" The conversation at the table died instantly. 7 heads turned to look at the woman in the sparkly dress standing by the server racks. Eldon Vance frowned, adjusting his glasses. The government agents did not move, but their hands shifted imperceptibly toward their jackets. "Who is this?" one of the agents asked, his voice low and dangerous. I stood up, ready to signal Jax to remove them. "My apologies. Gentlemen, this is a domestic disturbance. I will handle it." "Domestic?" Regina laughed. A shrill, hysterical sound. She strode toward the table, her heels clacking loudly. "Do not listen to her. She is trying to silence me, but I will not be silenced. I am the co-owner of this property, and I demand to be heard." She reached the table and slammed her hand down on the polished surface. Right next to a classified schematic, Courtney circled around, aiming her phone at the VIPs. "We are live, guys," she announced to her stream. "We are crashing the scam. Look at these suits. They are all in on it." "Regina," I said, my voice deadly calm, "you are interrupting a federal contract negotiation. Leave. Now." "No!" Regina screamed. Turning to face Eldon Vance, she put on her most tragic, pleading expression. "Sir, please, you look like a respectable man. You need to know who you are dealing with. This woman, this Summer Lamberton, she is a fraud." Vance leaned back in his chair, studying Regina with the curiosity of a biologist looking at a new species of poisonous frog. "A fraud, you say?" "A thief," Regina corrected. gesturing wildly at me. She stole my son's life insurance. She took the money meant for his grieving mother and sister and used it to build this fake factory. She keeps us prisoners here. She forces us to scrub floors. And worse. She leaned in, her eyes wide and crazy. She is washing money. Dirty money. We found the files. She calls it Project Phoenix. But we know what it really is. She is moving millions to offshore accounts. She is a criminal, and she is using my son's legacy to fund terrorism or drugs or God knows what. Courtney shoved her phone into Vance's face. Say hi to the internet. Are you buying her fake tech? Are you part of the laundering? The room was silent for a beat. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and absurd. Regina panted, looking from face to face, waiting for the outrage. She expected them to gasp. She expected them to stand up and arrest me. She expected to be hailed as the hero who uncovered the truth. Instead, Eldon Vance looked at me. A slow, dry smile spread across his face. Summer, Vance said, his voice amused. I knew you were diversifying your portfolio, but I did not know you had hired an improv troupe. Is this the entertainment for the lunch break? Regina's jaw dropped. Entertainment? I am Mrs. Regina Lamberton. I am a victim. You are a nuisance, the government agent said. Standing up, Ma'am, you are interfering with official business. Step back. You don't believe me? Regina shrieked, her voice cracking. She has brainwashed you too? Look at this place. It is a dungeon. She is evil. She is holding us hostage. She turned to the camera, grabbing Courtney's arm. Tell them, Courtney, tell the world what she did to us. She starved us. Courtney lied effortlessly to her viewers. She made us sleep on wood planks. She threatened to kill us if we told anyone about the money laundering. I looked at them. I looked at the desperation, the lies, the absolute refusal to accept reality. They were destroying themselves. Live on the internet, in front of the most powerful people in my industry. I did not need to shout. I did not need to defend myself. I had the ultimate weapon, the truth. Athena, I said, my voice cutting through Regina's sobbing performance. Yes, Summer, the AI responded. Override main display, I commanded. Play file, extortion _ evidence _ 001 .mp4, volume 100%. Executing, Athena replied. The massive 100-inch screen behind the conference table flickered. The topographical maps vanished. In their place, a high-definition video feed appeared. It was the footage from the previous evening. The image was crisp. Regina and Courtney were sitting at the communal table, looking smug and arrogant. The audio boomed through the high-fidelity speakers of the great hall, loud enough to shake the dust from the rafters. Regina's voice, amplified and undeniable. We use this. We make her pay. Courtney's voice. 5 million? That is a lot. Regina's voice. It is the price of silence. And you help too. Call that reporter friend of yours. Tell him Summer is running a cult, make it juicy. If she doesn't pay, we burn her to the ground. The video cut to the scene in my office, showing their hands rifling through the files. Their glee at finding the charity documents and twisting them into a blackmail plot. Regina's voice. We tell her that unless she transfers $5 million, we go to the FBI. In the Great Hall. The color drained from Regina's face so completely that she looked like a wax figure. She stared at the giant screen, watching her own mouth speak the words that condemned her. Courtney slowly lowered her phone. She looked at the screen, then down at her live stream. I could see the comments flying up the side of her display. They were not supportive anymore. Wait, are they blackmailing her? OMG. The mom is a psycho. This isn't a reveal. This is a crime. Courtney, you are extorting her? Unfollowing. Vance watched the video, his expression hardening. The amusement was gone. He looked at Regina with cold, hard disgust. Blackmail, Vance said, the word landing like a gavel. And corporate espionage, attempting to leverage a charitable foundation to extort a federal contractor. He turned to the government agents. I believe that falls under your jurisdiction. Does it not? It certainly does, the lead agent said. He pulled a radio from his belt. This is Agent Miller. We have a situation at the Lamberton facility. Requesting local law enforcement for transport. 2 suspects in custody. Regina backed away, shaking her head. No. That is a trick. That is a deep fake. She used her computers to make that up. It is raw footage, Regina, I said, stepping forward. Time-stamped, verified by the system logs, and now, broadcast to everyone in this room and everyone on Courtney's feed. I looked at Courtney. She was staring at her phone screen, horrified. You are still live, Courtney, I noted. Your fans are watching you commit a felony. You wanted to be famous? You just got your wish. You are going to be the most famous extortionist on the internet by noon. Courtney let out a strangled sob and fumbled to end the stream. But the damage was done. Screen recordings were already circulating. The internet never forgets. Regina lunged toward me, her hands clawing the air. You witch! You set us up! You left those files there on purpose. Jack stepped out from behind the server rack. He did not need to run this time. He simply stepped in front of me, a wall of muscle and tattoos. Regina bounced off his chest and stumbled back, tripping on the hem of her sequined gown. She fell hard onto the concrete floor. Her bouffant collapsed, her dignity shattered. She looked up, seeing only the faces of men who viewed her not as a victim, but as a criminal. Get them out of here, I said to Jax. Hold them in the security vestibule until the sheriff arrives. I have a contract to sign. Jax nodded. He reached down and hoisted Regina to her feet. She was sobbing now, messy, ugly tears that smeared her mascara down her cheeks. Courtney followed. Head hung low, no longer the star of her own show, just a terrified girl who had played a game she didn't understand, as Jax dragged them toward the exit. Regina looked back at me one last time. We are family, she wailed, the cry echoing through the vast, cold hall. No, I said, turning my back on her to face my partners. You are just a bad investment. The doors slammed shut, cutting off her wails. The silence that returned to the room was heavy, but clean. Apologies for the interruption, I said, smoothing the lapel of my blazer. I sat back down at the head of the table. Now, regarding the encryption protocols for the new satellite array, shall we continue? Eldon Vance looked at the closed doors, then back at me. He shook his head, a look of genuine respect in his eyes. Remind me never to play poker with you. Summer, he said. I do not play games, Eldon, I replied, picking up my pen. I just write the rules. We signed the contract 10 minutes later. The ink was still wet when the flashing lights of the police cruisers washed over the snow outside, painting the white world in shades of red and blue. The silence that descended upon the great hall was absolute. It was not merely the absence of noise. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating, that pressed down on the shoulders of everyone in the room. The video feed on the massive 100-inch screen froze on the final frame. Regina's face, twisted in a mask of greed, demanding $5 million. In the center of the room, the real Regina stood like a statue carved from ice. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup standing out in stark, grotesque relief. Her mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. The sequined gown, which she had worn to project power and status, now looked like a cheap costume under the unforgiving glare of the industrial lights. Beside her, Courtney's hands were shaking so violently that she could no longer maintain her grip on her smartphone. It slipped from her fingers, tumbling through the air in slow motion before hitting the polished concrete floor with a sickening crack. The screen shattered, and with it, the lifeline to the digital audience she had so desperately tried to impress. The live stream was dead, but the reality was just beginning. I stood at the head of the conference table, my hands resting flat on the cool surface. I did not look away. I did not blink. I let the silence stretch out. letting the full weight of their exposure sink into their bones. "You really have no idea who I am, do you?" I asked softly. My voice carried clearly across the room, cutting through the hum of the servers. Regina blinked, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally, looking for anything other than the truth. "I am the mother of your husband," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "I am family." "You are a liability," I corrected her. "And you have made a catastrophic miscalculation. You assumed that because I work in a remote facility, I am isolated. You assumed that because I do not flash wealth, I am vulnerable. You assumed that I am just a coder." I walked around the table, my boots making a solid, rhythmic sound on the floor. I stopped a few feet away from them, close enough to see the terror dilating their pupils. "I do not just write code, Regina. I write the architecture that the world stands on. The patent for the encryption standard used by 90% of the banking institutions in the Western Hemisphere? That belongs to me. The protocol that secures the power grid you rely on to heat your home? I wrote that." I turned to Eldon Vance, who was watching the scene with a look of grim satisfaction. "Mr. Vance," I said, "for the benefit of my mother-in-law, would you please clarify the nature of my relationship with Nebula Systems and the Department of Defense?" Vance stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket, his demeanor shifting from that of a casual observer to that of a corporate titan. "Mrs. Lamberton," Vance said, addressing Regina directly, "Summer is not merely a vendor. She is a foundational pillar of our industry. Her intellectual property is classified as critical infrastructure. In the eyes of the federal government, Summer Lamberton is a national asset." Vance took a step forward, his voice dropping to a gravelly low. "When you threatened to blackmail her, you did not just attempt to extort a wealthy woman, you threatened the operational security of a government partner. You just committed an act that the Department of Homeland Security takes very, very seriously." Regina looked at the men in the gray suits, the government agents. They were not smiling. One of them was speaking quietly into a wrist microphone. "No," Regina whispered, shaking her head frantically. "No, it was just a family dispute. We were just asking for support." "You demanded $5 million in exchange for silence regarding a fabricated crime," I said. "That is not support. That is a felony." I gestured to the shadows near the entrance of the residential wing. Jax, the head of security, stepped into the light. In his hand, he held a thick, heavy manila envelope. It was not the money Regina had dreamed of. It was something far more permanent. Regina's eyes locked onto the envelope. For a split second, a flicker of delusional hope crossed her face. She thought, perhaps, that I was paying her off just to make the scene end. She thought I was capitulating. "Is that?" she started to ask, her voice trembling. "It is not a check," I said coldly. Jax walked over and thrust the envelope into Regina's chest. She grabbed it reflexively. "Open it," I commanded. Regina fumbled with the clasp. Her fingers numb and clumsy, she pulled out a stack of documents, the paper crisp and white. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the legal jargon. "That," I said, pointing to the top document, "is a restraining order. It mandates that you and Courtney remain at least 500 yards away from me, this facility, and any property I own, effective immediately." I pointed to the second document. "That is a civil summons. I am suing you, Regina, for trespassing, for harassment, for the violation of the non-disclosure agreement you implicitly agreed to when you entered a secure facility, and for the attempted theft of trade secrets." Regina flipped through the pages, her breathing becoming shallow and erratic. "And keep reading," I said. Athena was very thorough. Regina turned the page and froze. She stared at a spreadsheet filled with numbers. Her numbers. "How?" she breathed. "How did you get this?" "My I scans for threats," I explained. "When you threatened to expose me for money laundering, Athena ran a background diagnostic on your financial history to assess your leverage. She found something interesting. I took a step closer. You have not filed a tax return in 4 years. Regina, and those consulting fees you took from Mark's business accounts before he died? You never declared them. That is tax fraud. The IRS is very aggressive about that sort of thing. I have taken the liberty of forwarding those findings to the relevant authorities. Regina dropped the papers. They scattered across the floor like dead leaves. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. But beneath the hate was the crushing realization that she was beaten. You ruin me, she hissed. You invite me into your home and you destroy me. I did not invite you, I reminded her. You invaded, and now we are going to settle the bill. I signaled to Jax again. He handed me a single sheet of paper. You said you wanted to talk about money, I said. Holding the paper up, you wanted $5 million. I am afraid I cannot accommodate that. However, I have prepared an invoice for your stay. I read from the list, my voice steady and businesslike. Item 1. Lodging for 3 nights in a secure facility. Rate, $500 per night per person. Total, $3,000. Item 2. Security detail. Jax does not work for free, and he has spent the last 72 hours monitoring you. That is a billable expense. $2,000. Item 3. Emergency maintenance for the server rack you nearly destroyed with your water pitcher. $5,000. Item 4. Emotional distress and legal processing fees. $5,000. I lowered the paper. Grand total, $15,000. Payable immediately. Regina laughed. A harsh, barking sound. You are insane. I do not have $15,000. You know I do not have it. I have nothing. I know, I said. I know exactly what you have. I know you sold your house to pay off the gambling debts you accumulated after Mark died. I know you have 0 assets. Then you can't get blood from a stone, Regina screamed. Sue me. I am bankrupt. I anticipated that, I said, which is why I made a strategic acquisition this morning. I walked back to the table and picked up my tablet. I tapped the screen and turned it around so she could see. It was a digital receipt from a debt collection agency. You took out a personal loan 3 years ago, I said. $75,000. You used Mark as a guarantor, but since his estate was insolvent, the debt reverted to you. You haven't made a payment in 6 months. The bank categorized it as a distressed asset. Regina's eyes widened. She recognized the loan number. Banks are very eager to get bad debt off their books. I continued. They sold your note this morning for 12 cents on the dollar. I bought it. I turned off the tablet. I am not just your daughter-in-law anymore. Regina, I am your creditor. I own your debt, which means I can garnish your Social Security. I can put a lien on any future assets you acquire. I can make sure that every single penny you earn for the rest of your life comes to me until that $75,000. Plus interest, plus the $15,000 for your stay here, is paid in full. Regina staggered back. She grabbed the edge of a server rack to steady herself. This was not a legal threat. This was a financial death sentence. She had thought she could bully me into giving her a fortune. Instead, I had purchased the chains that bound her. You, she whispered, you are a monster. I am a businesswoman, I said, and I am closing this account. I looked at Courtney. She was still staring at her broken phone, weeping silently. She had no fight left. She was just a child who had played with fire and burned the whole house down. Jax, I said, escort them out. Wait, Regina cried, panic surging again. Where are we supposed to go? It is snowing. We have no car. The truck is gone. The taxi service I called for you is waiting at the main gate, I said. It is a 40-mile drive to the nearest bus station. I have prepaid the fare. Consider it my final act of charity. You can't do this, Regina wailed, grabbing at the air as if she could physically pull back the reality of the situation. We are Lambertons. This is our house. This is my house, I said, my voice hard as diamond. And you are trespassing. I pointed to the main doors. The sheriff is parked right behind the taxi. Regina, he has a copy of the restraining order and the warrant for the extortion charges. If you are not off this property in 5 minutes, he will come inside, and I do not think you will like the accommodations in the county jail. Regina looked at the door. She looked at me. She looked at the powerful men sitting at the table who were watching her with utter indifference. She finally broke. Her shoulders slumped. The rage evaporated, leaving only a hollow, defeated old woman. She turned to Courtney. "Come on," she whispered harshly. "My phone," Courtney sobbed, reaching for the shattered device on the floor. "Leave it," Regina snapped. "Just move." They turned and walked toward the heavy steel doors of the great hall. They did not strut. They did not march. They shuffled. They looked small, gray, and insignificant against the backdrop of the towering black server racks. Jax followed them, his presence a silent promise of enforcement. As they reached the threshold, Regina paused. She turned back one last time. I expected a curse. I expected a final scream. But she just looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. She had spent 20 years underestimating me, thinking I was weak because I was quiet. She had never understood that silence is where the thinking happens. She stepped out into the cold corridor, and the heavy doors began to close. I watched them disappear, inch by inch, until the steel seal locked into place with a definitive, satisfying thud. The sound echoed through the hall, signaling the end of the invasion. I let out a long breath, feeling the tension drain from my muscles. I turned back to the conference table. Eldon Vance was smiling. "That," he said, "was the most efficient hostile takeover I have ever witnessed." "I learned from the best," I said, picking up my laser pointer. "Now, let us talk about the bandwidth allocation for the Asian sector. I believe we can optimize the flow by 15%. The meeting resumed. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the tracks of the intruders, erasing them from my world as if they had never been there at all. The flashing blue and red lights of the police cruisers painted the snow in violent, alternating strokes of color. It was a stark contrast to the sterile white purity of the mountain landscape, a visual reminder that the chaos of the human world had briefly intruded upon this sanctuary of logic and silence. I stood behind the glass wall of the security vestibule, my arms crossed over my chest, watching the final act of the drama play out. It was not a violent arrest. There were no handcuffs, at least not yet. The sheriff, a man who had known me for 2 years and respected the quiet way I ran my business, was professional but firm. Regina was arguing, of course, even as the officer guided her toward the patrol car. Her mouth was moving rapidly, her hands gesturing wild accusations at the building, at the sky, at God, but without her audience, without the leverage of guilt or the power of a live stream. Her words were just noise carried away by the wind. Courtney walked beside her, but she looked like a phantom. The police had confiscated her phone as evidence for the extortion investigation. Without the device in her hand, she seemed to have lost her center of gravity. She kept reaching for a pocket that was empty, her eyes darting around nervously. Unable to filter her reality through a beautifying lens, she was disconnected. For a girl whose entire existence was validated by likes and comments, this was a fate worse than prison. I watched as they were escorted not to the police cars, but to the waiting taxi I had summoned. The sheriff had issued them a citation and a warning, but the real legal hammer would fall later, in a courtroom, not on a snowy driveway. Regina stopped at the open door of the taxi. She looked back at the house. From this distance, I could not see her eyes, but I knew what she was seeing. She was seeing the massive, concrete fortress of the Alps rising against the gray sky. She was seeing the millions of dollars in infrastructure she had tried to steal. She was seeing the life she could have been a part of if she had possessed even a single ounce of humility. She got into the cab. Courtney followed. Jack stood by the main gate, his breath puffing in the frigid air. He was watching the rental truck, the moving truck that held all their worldly possessions. The driver, a hired hand from the city, was trying to turn the engine over. The starter motor whined. It coughed. Then it died with a pathetic metallic clunk. The driver tried again. Nothing. I saw a small, ghost of a smile touch Jax's lips. He tapped his earpiece and looked up at the camera I was watching through. Spark plugs are missing. Jax's voice came through the intercom, dry and amused. Must be the altitude. Engines struggle up here if they are not maintained. I smiled. Jax had not just escorted them out, he had ensured their departure was as inconvenient as possible. The taxi would take them to the bus station, but their furniture, their clothes, their mirrored vanities, all of it was stuck here in a dead truck until they could pay a tow truck to haul it down the mountain. And considering I had just bought their debt, I knew they did not have the credit limit for a tow. The taxi pulled away, its tires crunching on the gravel. It disappeared around the bend of the pine forest, the red taillights fading until they were swallowed by the gray afternoon. They were gone. The relief was physical. It started in my shoulders, which dropped 2 inches, and washed down through my spine. The tension that had held me rigid for the last 72 hours evaporated, leaving me feeling light, almost dizzy. I turned away from the window and walked back toward the great hall. The double doors opened, and the sound of the server farm washed over me, that steady, rhythmic hum that I loved so much. But this time, it was not just the machines making noise. As I stepped onto the walkway, the staff stopped what they were doing. Leo, the young coder who had been terrified of Regina, stood up from his workstation. Pivot, the blue-haired cryptographer, spun her chair around. The chef, Marcus, came out of the kitchen wiping his hands on a towel. Even the delegation from Nebula Systems, who were packing up their briefcases, stopped and looked up. There was no applause. This was not a movie, and we were not actors. But there was something better than applause. There was respect. They looked at me not just as their boss, but as the captain who had steered the ship through a storm and kept everyone dry. They had seen the footage. They knew I had protected the facility, protected their jobs, and protected the integrity of our work. I walked to the center of the room, feeling the weight of their gaze. I apologize for the disruption, I said, my voice steady. That was not the standard operating procedure for a Tuesday. A small ripple of laughter went through the room. It broke the tension. We have a lot of work to catch up on, I continued. But before we get back to the grind, I have an announcement to make. I looked at the young faces of my team, the social rejects Regina had mocked. You endured a hostile work environment for 3 days. You were insulted. You were inconvenienced. And you kept your cool. You protected the data. You protected this house. I paused, letting my eyes meet theirs. Effective immediately. Every member of the staff is receiving a 10% raise, and everyone gets a $5,000 bonus for what I am calling hazard pay. You earned it. This time. There was a cheer. Pivot punched the air. Leo grinned so wide I thought his face would crack. Now, I said, clapping my hands together. Let us get back to work. We have a satellite uplink to optimize. The room exploded into motion. Keyboards began to clack. Voices murmured in technical shorthand. The machine was running again, smooth and efficient. I walked toward the residential wing, needing a moment of true silence. 3 weeks passed before the final loose end was tied. I was in my office, reviewing the monthly power consumption report. When my phone buzzed, it was a message from my lawyer. Update on the Lamberton file. The text read, Regina has liquidated her remaining assets. She sold the jewelry and the designer handbags to a pawn shop in Denver. Proceeds were used to pay the initial installment of the debt recovery plan we structured. She has moved into a studio apartment in Aurora. It is a walk-up, no dishwasher. I read the words, feeling a strange sense of closure. It was not joy. It was just balance. Regina was finally living the life she could afford. She was finally facing the reality she had run from for decades. I scrolled down to the second part of the message. Courtney has been permanently banned from all major social media platforms for violating their terms of service regarding illegal acts and harassment. She is currently working as a barista. Her wages are being garnished by 20% to pay off her creditors. I put the phone down. Courtney, The girl who thought manual labor was beneath her was now serving coffee to people she used to look down on. She had lost her audience, and in doing so, she had been forced to find herself. Maybe, just maybe, it would be the making of her. I stood up and walked out to the balcony that overlooked the valley. The air was crisp and cold, biting at my cheeks. The sun was setting, casting a golden fire over the peaks of the Rocky Mountains. The snow was pristine, unbroken by tire tracks or footprints. The black SUV was gone. The moving truck was gone. The noise was gone. I leaned my hands on the rough, cold concrete of the railing. I looked out at the vastness of the world, at the indifference of the mountains, for so long. I had let the definition of family be dictated by a marriage certificate and a guilt trip. I had let Regina and Courtney make me feel small because I did not fit their mold. I had let them define me by my silence, by my lack of flash, by my grief. But standing here, in the fortress I had built with my own mind and my own money, I realized the truth. Family is not about blood. It is not about obligation. It is not about enduring abuse because you share a last name. Family is the people who stand beside you when the water pitcher is about to fall on the server. Family is the people who respect your code. Family is Jax, who carried a screaming woman out of a server room to protect my work. Family is Leo, who ran to warn me. Family is the community of minds I had gathered here in the wilderness. We were a family of misfits, of introverts, of builders, and we were stronger than the Lambertons could ever hope to be. The sliding glass door behind me opened. I turned to see Leo standing there. He was holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Hey, Summer," he said, stepping out into the cold. "I thought you might need this. It is a fresh pot. Marcus made it." He handed me the mug. It was warm in my hands, a small comfort against the chill. "Thanks, Leo," I said. "How is the system looking?" Leo smiled, looking out at the mountains. Green lights across the board, the new patch deployed without a hitch. The latency is down to 0.4 milliseconds. The code is running smooth. Summer, really smooth. "Good," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was rich and dark, just the way I liked it. "That is what I like to hear." Leo hesitated for a moment, then looked at me. "It is quiet now, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, looking back at the empty road that wound down the mountain. "It is." "Do you think they will come back?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, they won't come back. They cannot afford the toll." Leo laughed, a genuine sound that drifted away into the wind. He drank his coffee, nodded to me, and went back inside to his world of screens and logic. I stayed on the balcony for a moment longer. I breathed in the cold air, filling my lungs with it. It tasted of pine and snow and absolute, unadulterated freedom. I was Summer Lamberton. I was a widow. I was a coder. I was a CEO, and I was the queen of the Alps. I had faced the ghosts of my past, and I had evicted them. I had stared down the entitlement and the greed, and I had dismantled it with nothing but the truth and a very good lawyer. I smiled, turning my back on the view to walk back into the warmth of my home. The door slid shut behind me, sealing out the cold, sealing out the world, and sealing in the peace I had fought so hard to win. My life was no longer a story written by other people. It was my code. And finally, after all the bugs and the crashes and the errors, it was running perfectly. Narrator. The sweetest revenge is not found in the destruction of your enemies. It is not found in screaming matches or public scenes. The sweetest revenge is simply becoming so undeniable, so successful, and so completely whole that their darkness can no longer touch you. It is building a life so bright that their shadows have nowhere to fall. Summer did not just win the war. She built a world where the war could no longer exist. And that is the ultimate victory. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet room, or maybe your own fortress of solitude? Please leave a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of Summer's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this video reach more people. Your support means the world to us.